The Iraqi Republican Guard tank commander leans against his T-72's hull, cigarette glowing orange in the February darkness. Around him, dozens of Soviet-built tanks idle in the Kuwait desert, their crews confident, almost bored. It's past midnight on February 26, 1991, and they've been told the Americans are coming. The commander smirks. Let them come in the dark. Americans fight with technology, not guts. In darkness, all tanks are equal. His crew laughs. The Americans would never see them coming. The T-72 sits low in a defensive position, its 120 mm gun pointed toward empty blackness. No moon tonight. Visibility maybe 50 meters. The commander's training plays in his head. Wait for the muzzle flash. Return fire. Reload in under 10 seconds. Soviet doctrine. Proven doctrine. His gunner peers through the optical sight, seeing nothing but sand and shadow. Perfect. Defensive positions in darkness. This is where numbers matter, where experience matters. The Republican Guard has both. Radio chatter crackles. American armor spotted, moving east. The commander drops his cigarette, crushes it. Finally, his hand rests on the turret hatch, feeling the cool metal. The T-72 has fought in every desert war for 15 years. Proven, reliable. A brawler built for exactly this. Close-range slugfests, where the first tank to spot the enemy wins. He slides inside, pulls the hatch closed. The smell of gun oil and sweat fills the cramped interior. His gunner's breathing is steady. Good. They've done this before. Outside, the desert stretches invisible in every direction. No stars, no ambient light. The kind of darkness where your hand disappears 6 inches from your face. The commander feels the familiar confidence settling in. This darkness is an ally. American tanks might have fancy electronics, but electronics don't work in sandstorms. Electronics don't see through pitch black. His loader slides a sabot round into the breach. The metallic clank echoes inside the turret. Ready. The minutes drag. The commander scans through his sight, seeing only grainy green nothing. His ears strain for engine noise. Tank battles are loud, obvious things. You hear the enemy before you see them. See the muzzle flash before the round arrives. He's fought this way his entire career. The T-72's diesel engine rumbles beneath him, a steady heartbeat. His thumb hovers over the firing trigger. Just need one flash, one target. Then the training takes over. 3 miles away, something is watching. Something he cannot see, cannot hear, cannot imagine. The hunter has become the prey, but the Iraqi commander doesn't know it yet. He's still confident, still ready, still certain that darkness is his friend. His gunner shifts in his seat, adjusting the manual sight 1 more degree. Nothing. The radio hisses static. Other crews report the same. No visual contact, no movement, no targets. The commander wipes sweat from his forehead despite the February cold. Something feels wrong, but he can't name it. The darkness seems too complete, too heavy. His training never covered this absolute blindness, this waiting game where nothing moves and nothing shows. But orders are orders. Hold position. Wait for contact. He tells himself the Americans are probably just as blind, probably more scared, probably wishing they'd never rolled into the desert at night. He has no idea his tank is already in someone's crosshairs. The first T-72 explodes at 01:47 hours. No warning, no muzzle flash, just a catastrophic detonation that sends its turret cartwheeling through the darkness like a flaming pinwheel. The Iraqi commander's radio erupts with screaming. Contact! Contact! But where? His gunner frantically scans left, right, seeing nothing but black. Another explosion, 200 meters south. Another tank evaporating in a fountain of fire. The commander's heart hammers against his ribs. Return fire. But at what? His gunner is shouting now, spinning the turret, the manual traverse jerky and desperate. The optical sight shows nothing. No headlights, no silhouettes, no muzzle flashes stabbing through the dark. Just empty desert, and then, wham! Another fireball erupts to the north. The concussion slaps their hull. The commander's hands shake on the control grips. This is impossible. Tanks don't shoot blind. Tanks don't hit targets they can't see. His training, his experience, his entire understanding of armored warfare says this cannot be happening. There! His gunner screams, pointing at nothing. The commander looks. Blackness. Pure blackness. But tanks keep dying. The night sky glows orange now from burning fuel and ammunition, casting grotesque shadows that dance and twist. The smell of cordite and burning rubber floods through the ventilation system. His loader is praying, a low, desperate murmur in Arabic. The commander slaps him. Load! Keep loading! But load for what target? Another T-72 brews up, this one so close the heat washes over their armor. The commander sees the crew bail out, their forms briefly silhouetted against their own funeral pyre before they disappear into darkness. Radio discipline has collapsed. Everyone is screaming coordinates, but the coordinates mean nothing because no one can see the enemy. 2 o'clock. No, 11 o'clock. They're everywhere. The commander realizes with ice-cold certainty. They're not everywhere. They're exactly where they need to be, and his crews are firing at phantoms. He makes a decision. Driver, reverse. Get us. The world goes white. The sabot round punches through the T-72's frontal armor like it's cardboard, traveling faster than sound. The penetrator doesn't explode. It doesn't need to. At 1,650 meters per second, the kinetic energy alone turns the interior into a supersonic blender of molten metal and shrapnel. The commander's last thought is confusion, pure and absolute. How? How did they? 2 miles away in the cupola of an M1 Abrams, Sergeant First Class Brian McNerney marks another kill. His thermal sight shows the Iraqi tank's turret glowing white-hot against the cool desert background, clear as noon, sharp as crystal. He never saw the tank with his naked eye. Didn't need to. The FLIR system turns heat into vision, and diesel engines run hot, very hot. Through his sight, the battlefield looks like a shooting gallery. White-hot T-72s crawling across a cold gray landscape, each one desperately searching for an enemy they'll never see. Target destroyed, McNerney reports, voice calm. His gunner is already traversing to the next white blob. 4 seconds from identification to kill. The loader slams another sabot round home. The gun stabilization keeps the crosshairs perfectly steady despite the Abrams rolling forward at 30 miles per hour. Another squeeze of the trigger. Another T-72 dies 2 miles away, its crew never knowing what hit them, never firing a shot, never even seeing the flash. They were fighting ghosts. Ghosts with perfect vision. The surviving Iraqi crews stumble into headquarters at dawn, uniforms scorched, faces blank with shock. Their reports are hysterical, contradictory, impossible. The debriefing officer listens with growing disbelief. American tanks firing accurately at 3 kilometers in total darkness, through sandstorms, hitting moving targets they couldn't possibly see. He slams his fist on the table. Cowards, liars, making excuses for running. But the reports keep coming. Different units, different sectors, same story. T-72s destroyed without ever acquiring targets. Entire platoons annihilated before firing a single round. One tank commander swears American gunners were shooting through smoke so thick he couldn't see his own hand. Another claims his position was hit from beyond maximum effective range. Range charts say impossible. But his tank is a smoking crater outside Basra. The debriefing officer's certainty wavers. Too many witnesses. Too much consistency in the impossible details. A Republican Guard colonel examines the wreckage personally. The penetration holes tell a story that makes his stomach turn. Frontal armor defeats from extreme range. Perfect shot placement, driver's hatch, turret ring, ammunition storage. Not lucky hits, surgical precision. He measures impact angles, calculates firing distances. The mathematics say these shots came from positions where visual acquisition is physically impossible. No starlight, no moon, no ambient light whatsoever. He rechecks his calculations. They don't change. Soviet advisors arrive, skeptical. They've trained Iraqi crews for years, know the T-72's capabilities intimately. The Americans have good tanks, yes, but night fighting is chaos for everyone. No one shoots accurately in darkness. It's a fundamental truth of armored warfare. They examine destroyed T-72s, photograph the damage patterns, interview survivors. Their confidence drains like oil from a punctured sump. The evidence is undeniable. American tanks engaged and killed at ranges and in conditions that defy Soviet doctrine entirely. One advisor requests the ballistic data be sent to Moscow immediately, marked urgent. The Americans have something that changes everything. He watches footage from a surviving tank's gun camera, 14 seconds of grainy blackness, then a blinding flash as the tank explodes from an unseen impact. No tracer, no warning, just sudden catastrophic death from empty night. He rewinds it. Watches again. Nothing. The camera sees nothing because there's nothing to see. The technology they described shouldn't exist. Iraqi intelligence scrambles for explanations. Satellite guidance? No. These are direct-fire weapons. Radar-guided rounds? The Americans don't have those. Infrared searchlights? Soviet tanks would detect those immediately. They're trained for it. Every theory crumbles against the reality. American tanks are killing from ranges where human eyes are useless, in conditions where optics are blind, with accuracy that suggests they see perfectly. But see what? Heat? Electromagnetic radiation? Body warmth? A captured American manual surfaces, passed hand to hand through Iraqi command. Someone has underlined a phrase in broken English. Forward-looking infrared. The words mean nothing to most officers. Infrared is a spectrum, not a weapon. How does looking at infrared let you kill tanks in total darkness? A few educated guesses circulate. Thermal imaging, perhaps? But that technology is experimental, bulky, unreliable. The Soviets tested it years ago and abandoned the effort. Too expensive, too fragile, too impractical for battlefield use. The colonel stares at the manual, at the smoking wreckage outside, at the casualty report stacking on his desk. Hundreds of tanks destroyed, thousands of crew dead, and the Americans haven't lost a single tank to enemy fire. Not one. He knows tank warfare. He's studied every engagement since Kursk. This isn't how tank battles work. This isn't how any of this is supposed to work. Something has broken the rules. The M1 Abrams doesn't see light. It sees heat. Specifically, it sees the infrared radiation that every object above absolute zero emits constantly, invisibly, waiting to betray its presence to anyone with the right eyes. The forward-looking infrared system, FLIR, is those eyes. Mounted on the Abrams gunner's primary sight, the second-generation thermal imager detects temperature differences as small as 2 degrees Celsius and translates them into a crystal-clear picture. Hot objects glow white. Cool objects fade to black. The desert at midnight becomes a high-contrast photograph where diesel engines burn like signal flares. The technology emerged from 15 years of American investment after Vietnam exposed critical night-fighting deficiencies. First-generation thermal systems in the 1970s were crude, bulky, resolution so poor they could barely distinguish tank from truck. But by 1985, Hughes Aircraft and Texas Instruments had cracked it. compact modules with 240-line resolution, 3 or 5 micron wavelength sensitivity, built specifically for the M1A1 Abrams variant. Every tank rolling off the production line carried vision that turned darkness into an obsolete concept. The physics are elegant and merciless. A T-72's V12 diesel engine runs at 600 degrees Celsius. Its exhaust manifold glows hotter. Even after shutdown, the metal radiates heat for hours, a thermal signature visible for miles through the FLIR's scanning array. Optical camouflage means nothing. Paint and netting don't mask temperature. Smoke means nothing. Infrared wavelengths penetrate particulate clouds that blind normal vision. Darkness means nothing. Thermal radiation doesn't need photons. The T-72 becomes a beacon, bright and obvious, oblivious to its own visibility. Soviet designers never prioritized thermal sights because the technology seemed impractical. Too expensive for mass production. Too delicate for rough handling by conscript crews. Too power-hungry for the T-72's electrical system. They stuck with optical rangefinders and infrared searchlights, active systems that announced your position the moment you used them. The decision made economic sense in 1971. By 1991, it was a death sentence. Temperature became the ultimate betrayal. The gap isn't just technological, it's generational. First-generation Soviet thermal experiments barely worked in ideal conditions. Second-generation American FLIR operates flawlessly in sandstorms, smoke, total darkness, delivering target-quality imagery at ranges exceeding 5 kilometers. The Iraqi gunner peering through his optical sight might as well be blindfolded. The American gunner sees a detailed infrared landscape where every vehicle, every person, every warm object stands out with absolute clarity. This asymmetry transforms engagement geometry. Traditional tank doctrine assumes mutual visibility. Both sides see each other around the same moment. Victory goes to whoever shoots first and accurate. FLIR shatters that assumption. The Abrams identifies targets miles before the T-72 knows the Abrams exists. The Iraqi crew searches empty darkness while American gunners calmly verify range, wind, and target movement. It's not a fight. It's an execution with a 4-minute head start. The Abrams crew doesn't feel superhuman. To them, it's just the equipment working as designed. Gunner spots a white blob at 2,800 meters through the thermal sight. Calls identified T-72. Commander confirms. Laser rangefinder pings the target. Exact distance locks in the ballistic computer. The computer calculates bullet drop, adjusts the reticle. Gunner lays crosshairs, squeezes trigger. 4 seconds total. The sabot exits at 1,070 meters per second. 2 seconds flight time. The T-72 crew never even turned their turret toward the threat. They die confused, blind, utterly helpless. Soviet doctrine never prepared them for this. No one did. You can't train for an enemy who sees you when you're invisible. The kill begins with a pixel. The Abrams gunner's thermal display shows a white smudge at the edge of the screen. Heat signature 3,200 meters distant, moving left to right. He rotates the turret smoothly, centering the target. The thermal image sharpens. Boxy hull, low profile. Distinctive rounded turret. T-72, no doubt. His thumb presses the laser rangefinder button. Invisible infrared pulses out, bounces back in nanoseconds. The ballistic computer digests the data. 3 out 187 meters exactly. Numbers cascade through the M1A1's fire control system faster than thought. The computer knows the M829 sabot round leaves the barrel at 1,670 meters per second. Knows the round drops 4.2 meters over that distance. Knows crosswinds at 12 knots require a 0.3 mil correction. Knows the tank is moving at 18 kilometers per hour, requiring 1.1 mils of lead. The gunner never does the math. The reticle simply shifts, compensating automatically. A small white box brackets the T-72's center mass. Perfect firing solution. The stabilization system is the invisible miracle. The Abrams is rolling forward at 35 kilometers per hour over broken desert, pitching and yawing with every dune and crater. Inside the turret, the gunner feels every jolt. But the 120mm gun doesn't. Gyroscopes and hydraulics keep the barrel locked on target with terrifying precision, absorbing movement, maintaining point of aim regardless of hull motion. The T-72 has stabilization too, but crude, accurate maybe to 1,500 meters while moving. The Abrams hits targets at 3,000 meters while doing 40 miles per hour. It's not even close. "Fire," the commander says. The gunner squeezes. The gun roars. A concussive slam that rattles teeth and compresses lungs. Recoil rocks the 60-ton tank backward 6 inches. The sabot round screams downrange, a depleted uranium dart traveling faster than a rifle bullet, surrounded by a disposable aluminum sleeve that peels away in flight. 2 seconds later, the dart arrives at the T-72's frontal glacis with kinetic energy equivalent to a locomotive hitting a wall. The penetrator punches through the Soviet armor like a nail through plywood. Inside, the kinetic energy converts to heat, thousands of degrees in milliseconds. Metal vaporizes. Ammunition cooks off. The turret lifts lazily, almost gently, then flips end over end in a somersault of flame and shrapnel. Through the thermal sight, the kill is instantaneous. White blob becomes white fireball, then fades to black as the wreckage cools. 4 seconds from identification to destruction. The loader is already moving. He yanks another sabot from the ready rack, a 40-pound round in a semi-combustible casing. Slams it into the breech. The autoloader assist guides it home with a metallic clack. "Up!" he shouts. The gun is ready again. Total reload time, 6 seconds, even while the tank bounces over terrain at combat speed. Iraqi T-72 crews need 10 seconds minimum, and that's stationary with a well-trained loader. The Americans can kill, reload, and kill again before the Iraqis even acquire their first target. The gunner is already scanning for the next thermal signature. There, another white blob, 2,140 meters, moving into a hull-down position behind a berm. Too late. The laser has already ranged it. The computer has already solved the ballistics. The crosshairs settle on the visible turret. Another squeeze. Another kill. The Iraqi crew die still searching for muzzle flashes that never come, firing at nothing, confused until the moment the sabot turns their tank into a crematorium. By the time they saw fire, they were already dead. The Battle of 73 Easting erupts on February 26, 1991, at 16:18 hours when Eagle Troop, 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment, crosses an invisible grid line in the Iraqi desert. Captain H.R. McMaster's 9 M1A1 Abrams tanks roll through a sandstorm so thick visibility drops to 200 meters. His crews can barely see their own formation. But through their FLIR sights, the Iraqi positions glow like Christmas lights. T-72s, BMP infantry carriers, trucks, all radiating heat signatures and perfect clarity. McMaster counts over 50 vehicles. His gunners are already lacing targets. The engagement becomes a conveyor belt of destruction. McMaster's tanks fire on the move, the stabilization systems keeping guns locked despite the rolling terrain and 40-kilometer-per-hour advance. Sabot rounds crack downrange every 8 seconds. T-72s explode before they traverse turrets. BMPs brew up with crews still mounting. Iraqi infantry scramble from trenches into the sandstorm, running blindly into a killing field they cannot see. The Americans methodically work left to right, thermal sight to thermal sight, like exterminators clearing a building. Second Lieutenant John Gifford's tank kills 7 T-72s in 4 minutes. His gunner, Staff Sergeant Craig Koch, never loses sight of the battlefield. The FLIR penetrates the sandstorm effortlessly, painting Iraqi armor in stark white on black contrast. The fire control computer adjusts for wind, temperature, and ammunition lot variance automatically. Koch's job is almost mechanical. Identify, lace, fire, reload. The T-72 crews die without comprehending their situation. Some never even start their engines. Others fire randomly into the storm, their rounds sailing into empty desert while sabot penetrators arrive from directions they never looked. The battle lasts 23 minutes. When the sandstorm clears, the desert floor is littered with shattered Iraqi vehicles, 28 T-72s destroyed, 16 personnel carriers obliterated, 39 trucks burning. Eagle Troop losses, 0. Not a single American tank damaged by enemy fire. The lopsidedness isn't luck or superior tactics. It's technological supremacy so absolute it nullifies courage, training, and numerical advantage. The Iraqis fought as hard as physics allowed. Physics wasn't enough. The carnage repeats across Kuwait. At Medina Ridge on February 27th, the 1st Armored Division 2nd Brigade destroys 186 Iraqi tanks in 4 hours of nighttime fighting. Again, the pattern. American tanks engaging at 2,500 to 3,000 meters through darkness and smoke. Iraqi tanks dying without ever identifying targets. The Republican Guard, Saddam's elite, his best equipment, his most experienced crews, evaporates like morning dew. One American battalion reports a 50-0 kill ratio. Another, 37-0. The numbers stop sounding like combat statistics and start sounding like murder. Highway 80 becomes the highway of death. Retreating Iraqi columns fleeing Kuwait City stretch for miles, bumper-to-bumper trucks and tanks, and stolen civilian cars. American aircraft and armor converge on the traffic jam after dark. Through thermal sights, the convoy glows like a serpent of white heat against the cool asphalt. The engagement is systematic. Lead vehicles destroyed to block the road, rear vehicles destroyed to trap the column, then methodical destruction of everything between. By dawn, 1,400 vehicles smolder in a miles-long graveyard, lit only by burning steel. The Iraqi military doesn't just lose. It ceases to exist as a coherent fighting force. Not from being outfought, but from being outmatched in a dimension they didn't know warfare had entered. Entire armored divisions that took years to build and train are deleted in single nights. The survivors stagger home with stories of invisible Americans who killed in total darkness with impossible accuracy. The highway became a graveyard lit only by burning steel. Soviet tank doctrine, refined over 50 years and 2 world wars, rests on 3 fundamental assumptions. First, armored combat occurs at visual ranges where both sides see each other simultaneously. Second, victory favors massed formations that overwhelm through numbers and firepower concentration. Third, night and weather provide defensive advantage by equalizing technology gaps. Every assumption disintegrates in the Kuwaiti desert. The Americans see when Soviets expect blindness. American precision defeats Soviet mass. Defensive conditions become offensive opportunities. Every assumption was wrong. The doctrinal collapse ripples through military academies in Moscow. Instructors who spent careers teaching engagement ranges of 800 to 1,500 meters, ranges where the T-72's 125-meter gun matches Western tanks, now confront reports of consistent kills beyond 3,000 meters in zero visibility. The mathematics of armored warfare have changed. Range tables, firing solutions, tactical positioning, all calculated for mutual visibility, become obsolete overnight. Soviet doctrine assumed technology parity with acceptable gaps. FLIR isn't a gap, it's a chasm. The massed armor charge, the centerpiece of Soviet breakthrough tactics, transforms from offensive doctrine to suicide pact. The concept worked in World War II. Concentrate 50 tanks, overwhelm defensive positions through sheer numbers and shock. One breakthrough tank succeeds where 10 cautious tanks fail. But the doctrine requires closing to effective range before taking catastrophic losses. Against thermal sights, there is no closing. The charge becomes a parade of thermal signatures advancing into precision fire, each tank identified and killed sequentially at ranges where return fire is physically impossible. Iraqi commanders who survived described the psychological horror, ordering attacks into darkness against an enemy who kills with perfect accuracy from nowhere. Crews refuse to advance. Officers threaten execution. Some crews advance anyway, following orders, maintaining formation discipline, doing everything their Soviet training demanded. They die in formation systematically, still maintaining doctrine as sabot rounds turn their vehicles into crematoriums. Courage becomes irrelevant when the enemy sees you 3 miles before you see them. The Soviet night-fighting playbook becomes a catalog of failure. Infrared searchlights, designed to illuminate targets for optically equipped gunners, now announce your position to every FLIR-equipped tank within 10 kilometers without helping you see anything. Maskirovka camouflage techniques perfected over decades hide visual signatures beautifully, but do nothing against thermal detection. Smoke screens that blind optical systems become transparent to infrared wavelengths. Every defensive technique, every offensive maneuver, every tactical principle assumes an enemy constrained by the same sensory limitations. That enemy no longer exists. The realization crashes through Soviet military planning like a wrecking ball. The T-72, exported to 40 countries, backbone of Soviet armored strategy, suddenly obsolete. Not obsolete like an older model outperformed by a newer one, obsolete like a musket facing a rifle. The engagement paradigm has shifted. Soviet tanks still hit hard at close range, but close range is unreachable when the enemy kills from beyond your maximum sensor envelope. It's not about armor thickness or gun caliber anymore. It's about who sees first. Russian analysts understand immediately. The Americans didn't win through better tactics or superior training. They won because they fought a different war, one where thermal imaging redefined the battlefield geometry. Soviet doctrine built around visual combat becomes a relic, designed for conditions that no longer constrain the enemy. 50 years of tactical development, millions of hours of crew training, thousands of pages of field manuals, all suddenly historical documents describing warfare that exists only when both sides are equally blind. Darkness was supposed to be the great equalizer. Instead, it became a weapon. The Soviet Ministry of Defense convenes emergency meetings within weeks of the ceasefire. General staff officers watch grainy footage of destroyed Republican Guard divisions, units equipped with their best export tanks, trained by their instructors, following their doctrine. The images show perfectly aligned kill shots, surgical precision, overwhelming one-sidedness. A colonel proposes explanations. Superior American training, Iraqi incompetence, terrain advantages. A general silences him. The Americans have a 15-year technology lead in thermal imaging. Nothing else matters. Russia frantically retrofits thousands of tanks with thermal sights. The retrofit program becomes a crisis of scale and economics. Second-generation FLIR systems cost $200,000 per unit in 1991, comparable to an entire T-72's production cost. Russia's tank force numbers 20,000 vehicles. Full thermal modernization would cost $4 billion, roughly 15% of the entire Soviet defense budget before the USSR collapses. They prioritize frontline units first, export models never. The T-72s shipped to Syria, India, Iraq get optical upgrades at best, magnified blindness. The thermal gap remains. Export customers panic. Egypt, Syria, Algeria, Libya, nations whose armored forces consist almost entirely of Soviet equipment, watch Desert Storm and realize their tank fleets are target practice. Damascus requests immediate contract cancellations and refunds. Algeria demands thermal retrofits on 300 T-72s at Soviet expense. India threatens to abandon decades of Soviet partnership and court Western suppliers. The diplomatic fallout matches the military humiliation. Soviet armor, once synonymous with rugged effectiveness, becomes synonymous with obsolescence. Western defense contractors smell blood. General Dynamics, manufacturer of the M1 Abrams, sees export orders triple. Countries that previously bought Soviet tanks for cost savings now pay premium prices for American thermal capability. Saudi Arabia orders 315 M1A2s. Egypt switches entirely to American armor. Kuwait rebuilds its destroyed military with nothing but Western equipment. The global arms market shifts tectonically. Thermal sights become the mandatory baseline, and only NATO suppliers have mature production. The economic impact cascades through Russia's defense industry. Tank production facilities in Nizhny Tagil and Omsk slow to crawls as export orders evaporate. Thousands of engineers and technicians are laid off. The ministry frantically pushes the T-90 as a modernized alternative with thermal sights included, but the damage is done. Buyers remember the burning T-72s on CNN. They remember the 100-0 kill ratios. They remember that Soviet doctrine failed when it mattered most. The T-90 launches with lukewarm reception. Too little improvement, too late to matter. Russian military doctrine undergoes forced evolution. New field manuals emphasize dispersed formations to avoid mass thermal signatures. Night combat training shifts from assuming mutual blindness to assuming American thermal superiority. Tank designers prioritize thermal reduction, exhaust baffles, cooling systems, engine shrouds to minimize heat signatures. The Americans redefined the battlefield. Russia scrambles to survive in it. But redesigning an entire armored force takes decades. For years, Russian tankers train knowing they're outmatched in the dimension that matters most. China watches and learns. Their military, also equipped with Soviet-derived designs, accelerates indigenous thermal development. By 2000, every new Chinese tank rolls off the line with thermal imaging standard. They skip the retrofit nightmare entirely, leapfrogging directly to thermal parity. The lesson is universal. You cannot compete in modern armored warfare without thermal sights. Any nation that tries fights the last war. And the last war ended badly for everyone who couldn't see in the dark. The T-72 became synonymous with obsolescence. Not because it was poorly designed, but because it was designed for a world where everyone was equally blind. Modern warfare divides into thermal haves and have-nots. The division is absolute, unforgiving, binary. Armies with second-generation or better thermal imaging fight at night with near-daytime effectiveness. Armies without thermal sights fight blind, relying on luck, hoping for cloudy weather that equalizes neither side. The gap determines outcomes before the first shot fires. Syria's T-72s, still lacking thermal sights in 2016, face Turkish M60T tanks upgraded with modern FLIR. The Syrians lose 15 tanks in a single engagement without destroying one Turkish vehicle. The pattern from 1991 repeats endlessly across conflicts, across continents. The technology proliferates but unevenly. Western militaries standardize thermal sights on every combat vehicle. Tanks, infantry carriers, helicopters, even individual soldier weapon sights. The cost drops from $200,000 per unit in 1991 to $15,000 by 2020 as production scales and technology matures. But $15,000 remains prohibitive for developing nations. Their tank forces operate with the same optical equipment Iraqi crews used in 1991, guaranteed to die against any opponent with thermal capability. The technology gap becomes permanent, self-reinforcing. Wealthy nations see farther, shoot first, win decisively, then sell their battlefield-proven equipment at premium prices. Doctrine follows technology. American armor manuals now assume thermal superiority, planning night operations as freely as daylight missions. Russian doctrine assumes thermal parity at best, emphasizing concealment and signature reduction. Third world militaries train knowing they're permanently disadvantaged, hoping never to face opponents with thermal sights. Tank combat becomes a stratified hierarchy. Thermal-equipped forces at the top, optical-only forces at the bottom, with predictable results when they meet. The lesson reverberates through every conflict since 1991. Chechen rebels ambush Russian tanks using World War II tactics, close-range RPG attacks in urban terrain where thermal advantage diminishes. It works, barely, because fighting Russian T-72s with minimal thermal upgrades is survivable. Fighting American Abrams with full FLIR suites would be suicide. The Chechens know it. Afghan insurgents know it. They avoid direct engagement with thermal-equipped forces, shift to IEDs and ambushes, fight asymmetrically because fighting symmetrically means death from invisible enemies. The psychological impact endures. Tankers who survive Desert Storm, Iraqi, Russian, Soviet advisors, carry the memory of helplessness, of dying without ever seeing the enemy. That memory informs training, procurement, doctrine for every military force that operates in regions where American armor might deploy. The fear isn't the Abrams tank itself. It's the knowledge that thermal sights erase your defensive advantages, nullify your training, render your courage irrelevant. You can be perfect tactically and still die confused, never having fired a shot. The new rules are simple and brutal. See first, shoot first, win. Don't have thermal sights? Don't fight at night. Don't fight in smoke. Don't fight in sandstorms. Don't fight, period. Because conditions that once favored defenders now favor whoever invested in thermal technology. The Iraqis learned this in darkness, surrounded by burning tanks, screaming into radios about impossible enemies. Thousands of tankers since have learned the same lesson, some surviving, most not. Desert Storm demonstrated what asymmetric technological advantage looks like in practice. Not close victories, not Pyrrhic wins, but systematic annihilation. The T-72 crews were brave. They followed orders. They maintained discipline. They did everything right according to Soviet doctrine. And they died by the hundreds, killed by enemies they never saw, fighting a war their equipment couldn't win. The Iraqis learned what countless others would. You can't fight what you can't see. Darkness stopped being neutral. It became a weapon, and only one side knows how to use it.